Hello, everyone. Welcome back to MSJ. And on today's webinar, this is a very, very special webinar in case you have not realized. So we are happy to have a collaborative webinar with Research Alpha. And leading us through that conversation will be Mariam Nina Hadi. Mariam is doing her PhD at the University of Oxford, and she's the current president of the Oxford University Africa Society. So we are excited to have her here today. And I will now hand over to her, and she will do the honors of introducing our wonderful guest and the conversation we're going to have today.
Thank you so much, Anita. So I'm actually an avid watcher and viewer of MSJ, and I've just always been in awe of the inspiring scientists that you guys have had on board. So it's very phenomenal, the work that you do. But speaking of inspiring scientists, it's an absolute honor. It's a pleasure to reintroduce someone who is no stranger to MSJ, actually, and has been as a personal inspiration to me and so many others. Today, we are joined by Dr. Anne Makena. She's a power force in academia, and now she's doing remarkable in entrepreneurship. Anne is the co-director of the Africa Oxford Initiative, AFOX as we know it, where she leads efforts to foster equitable and impactful relationships between African institutions and the University of Oxford. But also, she's the founder of Research Alpha, which is an innovative platform that bridges the gap between cut-edge research and the practical needs of businesses, investors. And if you know one thing about Anne, she's absolutely passionate about the African continent. So of course, it would be in an emerging market like the continent. Anne holds a DPhil in chemical biology from the University of Oxford, and she recently completed an executive MBA at the Said Business School. So this further solidifies her expertise and experience when it comes to blending scientific insights with strategic business acumens. And what's truly remarkable about Anne is her ability to take complex ideas and sort of like transform them into actionable solutions that do not only advance science, but also drive very tangible societal and economic impacts. On a personal note, I've always been in awe of Anne's dedication, her ability to lead with both intellect, and if you know Anne as a person, you know that she leads with her heart. Her journey from academic pursuits to creating a platform as huge as AFOX and now to Research Alpha is truly a testament of her vision, her resilience, and the profound impact that one individual can make when it comes to connecting disciplines and so many communities. I've learned so much from her, not just about science or research, but about how to lead with purpose and passion. And that's one thing that I hope that everyone here in this webinar will leave with. I hope you leave as inspired as Anne makes me. Anne, it's always a pleasure to have you, and we're so excited to hear so much about your journey and your vision for Research Alpha. So Anne, please take it away.
Wow, okay. When someone starts like that, where do you go? I feel like we can pack it up now, and anything I say might mess up that perception. Wow, thank you so much, Mariam, for that very generous introduction. Thank you, Ruth, Anita, Mariam, for the opportunity to come back to the MSJ community. It's always a joy to be with you all. It's always a privilege to share my journey with you and to walk together. And so I'm really, truly honored and delighted to be a part of the conversation today. I will not say too much about my previous work, which I already shared in a previous session, and I will be doing more of introducing Research Alpha, which is a new outfit that I'm excited about, and I hope you get excited about it too. So I don't know, Mariam, if you've got my slides, or if you're going to share them, because I don't think I have capability to share them. But as you get that together, for those who are meeting me for the first time, I would quickly just give you a very quick snapshot of my journey that has already been shared by Mariam. I started out as a biochemist. I love tinkering with bacteria. I enjoyed the process of research a lot. And more importantly, I enjoy the process of thinking through with problems. I think that's the one line that catches, that cuts across my entire life. I love thinking through with problems. And it is from that experience that sort of led to the birth of AFOX, which the problem there was that there isn't much, at least in the University of Oxford at the time, there wasn't a platform that drew together Oxford's Africa engagement and challenged the way we did research in partnership with Africa. So the question for me there was, can we be able to create a system or a platform that, one, creates a sense of understanding of the extent of Oxford's engagement with Africa, two, challenges the way we engage with the continent to be more equitable and more sustainable, and three, creates opportunities for building the capacities of young Africans to be able to leverage their knowledge, their expertise for global impact. And that's how we ended up with scholars like Mariam and Ruth and Anita and many of you on this call, really inspiring people, challenging the notions of what excellence looks like from an African lens, and more importantly, pushing the boundaries of what Oxford can and should deliver for African students. So I'm really excited that I can see the fruits of my sort of labor in real time. What a privilege, what an absolute privilege. And so after at the risk of, telling people my age, after about 10 years of working in and with sort of AFOX, we've got to a point where we've built a massive database of really incredible researchers across the continent who are thinking about the problems of the continent, are very close to the solutions as well. And the question that kept me awake at night was this big database of about 5,000 incredible academics, researchers who are doing fantastic work. That knowledge is not being tapped to help advance, development across the continent, both from a business perspective, but also from a policy and so forth. So we are very good at sort of research to community engagement, maybe to a greater extent research to policy engagement, but not so much to research to business engagement. And so that was the genesis of Research Alpha. And really what it is at the core of it is a platform that will enable researchers to connect with the business community, both monetize their expertise, but more importantly, scale their impact by engaging with people who are moving funding into various big challenges and impact programs across Africa. So allow me to race through this very quick slides, and then after that we'll have a really hopefully engaging conversation. Do you want to go ahead, Mariam?
Yes. So I've shared the slides. Can you see them?
Yes.
Perfect. Take it away.
Good. So why start this journey at all? So part of it, I would credit it to the MBA bag. Anybody who's been in business school, it just makes you think differently. I'm a scientist by training. I've not been trained to think about money. I think of money like the way I think of, a buffer or a solution in the lab, that it helps me to do something, And so business school really did open my mind to thinking about, a different way of thinking about our impact as scientists and as researchers in the world. And in this, there's a realization that the consulting service is broken. Academics and researchers have got such incredible wealth of knowledge. And on the other hand, there's such desperate need for understanding the changes in both business operating landscapes, but also the technology disruptions that are happening across different markets. Equally understanding that there's a lot of inefficiency in operations in businesses at the moment. If you think about the cost of, power, for instance, it's really disrupting how businesses should work. If you think about the requirement for environmental sustainability, is disrupting how businesses should work. In the context of Africa specifically, you think about the impact of business on livelihoods, on employment, and so forth, is pushing businesses to think, beyond just our returns. On the other hand, you've got over 10 million active researchers globally, people who are producing knowledge of the highest caliber, who are not looked into these questions, And it's that untapped potential of our academic rigor, of our ways of thinking, that caught me thinking, how do we leverage this network, particularly for the context of development in the continent? So why researchers? Why not go to big four consulting firms, etc.? Because I think that we've got something to bring that's different. One is the in-depth knowledge. I spent 5 years in the lab tinkering with bacteria, thinking about antimicrobial resistance, thinking about new diagnostic tools for this. Ruth does the same thing, Mariam does the same thing, and many of you in this room spend a lot of time with very specific questions, thinking through them. And that depth of knowledge cannot be found, and forgive me for being too crass, cannot be found by somebody who skimmed through a couple of newspaper articles and thought, oh, okay, this is the problem with battery technology. This is what we need to do. That depth of knowledge is so important right now because that's what gives any business an edge above the competition. The other thing that makes researchers valuable is they're independent. I don't have skin in the game. So when I tell you that this is how you think about a diagnostic for HIV, and that if you bring one to the market today, maybe Gates will have already flooded the market with free ones. I'm not trying to scoop you off your business. I'm just being objective as a researcher, and it's in our best interest to remain objective as researchers. The other really great advantage academic researchers and researchers more broadly have got is we've practiced over the years the capacity to learn things very quickly and then to translate those to teach if you're a lecturer, or to train in tutorials, or to teach another student to do the same experiment. That muscle of problem solving is so active that you can find the problems very quickly. You can find solutions quickly where there's not even data. You can be able to design ways of accessing that information and then passing it on, which is the whole point. This is the problem. This is how we think about the solution. And here is how you can start thinking about implementing resolutions for yourself. And then the other one, which is a bit disingenuous, is that we're broke. Academics are some of the most undervalued resources in the knowledge economy, right? You can tell that from the fact that a junior consultant first salary fresh out of undergrad would be something like 50K in the UK, but an academic post PhD will be having maybe 30-something thousand, right? So these are some of the most undervalued and undertapped resources. And so for me, the reason why this became a critical thing is to unlock the knowledge that we've got, use it for real world impact, and also get sufficiently valued for the work that we've put in. Next slide. I think I've already spoken to this quite a bit. There is a friction in the system so that, for a researcher who wants to actually do this, who understands the value of their contribution to the business world, the work of the work of connecting with the right kinds of people, networking. Good. The work of connecting with the right people, knowing how to network the right colleagues in the business world. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of effort. Creating, I know that because we've tried with a bunch of our friends, creating a consulting, business in and of itself is very demanding, and nobody's got time for that. You've got papers to publish, you've got students to mark scripts for and read their theses and and still have a life, right? So it takes a lot of time and effort, and often you don't always get, you have people who are picking your brains but not really having any additional value to you. So one of the things that we really want to do is make that process a lot more seamless for researchers. And then the second bit, for the business side, it costs a lot of money. You have to go to the big four and so forth to be able to access timely insights. And even then, it's not on demand. You have to write a big, terms of reference, have them think through the problems, take days to come back and forth and so forth. And so for a business that's nimble, that doesn't always lend itself as the most appropriate way to access research insights. And more importantly, it's very expensive, especially for businesses in the continent who, first-time fund managers and so forth, who may not be able to access that amount of money to spend on consultancy firms. So what's the solution? It's sort of an all-in-one business research platform. So for experts, we provide a pipeline. I've been fortunate over the last few years to work with over 30 the various businesses across Africa, across other markets as well, that are investing in the continent, all the way from established corporates to investors to fund managers and so forth. So exciting pipeline to work through, and then we provide an integrated scheduling and payment system, and we train, because you will very quickly realize when you start doing this work that businesses are from Mars and researchers are from Venus. So there's an element of translation there that needs to happen. So we provide a lot of that support, and then you can brand yourself, and you can be able to, from Research Alpha, create a micro consulting environment for yourself. And same thing for businesses. I mean, I wouldn't belabor the point too much, but they get access to you, phenomenal people who understand the problems that they are trying to solve and can articulate the solutions that are possible. We make it easier for them to access that talent instead of trolling through LinkedIn pages endlessly. And they also get timely, reliable, and more importantly, usable insights on demand. And next, I think, yes, okay, I think this is the same thing. So it's pretty straightforward to sign up. We'll put a link on the website. Just fill in your details. The first round that we sent around, we had feedback that, this is too hard, too much work. I'm like, you can't fill a 5 minutes bio link. Maybe you should consider not doing this work. But there's a very straightforward link that you can just fill in, put in your details. You allocate your own time. So you can say, I'm only free on Saturdays between 10 and 5, or you can say, I'm only free on Mondays, because that's when I don't, have lab work or whatever. And then you can allocate your rate as well. We are encouraging people to put in a nominal rate, but we will negotiate so that people don't end up being fleeced. So that's part of it, because a challenge when you go to negotiate with businesses, they will try and make the most out of you with paying you the least possible. So we are able to leverage our network and our platform to be able to make sure you get the best possible rate. And because these are investors that we trust and have worked with before, we can push the boundaries because we know what they are capable of giving. And the more you do, the better your rate gets. And then finally, you can now invest your time in things that bring value to you, both as an academic, but also as a person who cares about particular issues in the world. So the logistics and the consulting side of things gets handled. And is that the final slide? I think, please join. We are growing. The network is growing. We first started October. This year, we have a big network that's growing across the UK, and we're hoping to expand in other places. At the moment, we're targeting people on at least after their first year of the PhD. I know there's plenty of others who've got experience, but at the moment, because the idea is to really bring that technological know-how to the table, not just strategy and process improvement, but because of that technological lens, we're targeting people who are at least PhD level and above. And if you have any particular expertise that you think, well, I don't have a PhD yet, but I've got all this other experience in managing, consulting projects, you can obviously write to us, and we will be able to assess your capability and put you on the platform. And yes, so feel free to ask any questions and get in touch. We'll put the link on the site if you want to immediately register. And if you want to find out more information, I'm here. So let's talk.
Wow. And I think I said this during my introduction, and you've only reiterated it, is that every time we have a conversation with you, we are always in awe and we always leave inspired. And the work that you've done with Research Alpha is absolutely phenomenal, and I'm very impressed by it. For those that are sort of really interested when it comes to policy making within the continent, because that's one of the huge areas that when it comes to making substantial change. So my question is, how can data-driven platforms like Research Alpha enhance the healthcare planning and policy making in not just emerging markets, but the continent?
So one thing that I find very fascinating is the question of whose data, which data, and to what end, right? So it's not enough to just have data because we've got plenty. I mean, we're not a data desert as people would like to make it. It's just that it's devolved across multiple places and it is not always in a way that is integrated enough that you can make sense of it, right? So I'll give an example from my own area of expertise. When I started my PhD many moons ago, we only had antimicrobial resistance data for we did not have data for 40% of African countries, right? But even when we looked at the countries where we had data, then let's say in Kenya, for instance, you would have data for 3 national hospitals. That doesn't give you a full picture for the rest of the country. And so if you're making interventions that are around improved diagnostics or improved surveillance and so forth, and all you have is 3 national hospitals, you really do miss out significantly. The complexity of our continent, especially even at just one country, let alone at super country level, it becomes really difficult to be able to use the 3 data points that you've got for 3 national hospitals to generalize the entire country. Now, imagine we use that data to generalize a country and then generalize a region, and in some really, really, primitive cases, to generalize the entire continent. So that's some of the gaps that we've got. But at the same time, we've got people who are medical researchers that have been working on the grassroots in those, sub-national hospitals that can feed this data and say, if you're going to roll out an intervention on, antimicrobial resistance surveillance in rural Nigeria, for instance, these are the things that you need to think about, right? So even as you think about data for policy, it's one, the granularity, and two, the integration. I think that's where platforms like Research Alpha are supportive, because you get to talk to people who are boots on the ground, right? It's not things that you pick out from some publication somewhere. You talk to people who are actual boots on the ground, and they will save you the time of rolling out long-term interventions that cannot even, they do not scale. And from the policy space, we've got plenty of case studies where something was started with a good intention, but with inadequate information.
Thank you so much, Anne. I have a few more questions, but if anyone
Yes.
has questions, please leave it in the chat, or I'll open up the floor so you can also unmute. So my other question, because you did mention and speak about mentoring within Research Alpha, and because I know that Research Alpha, I'm assuming will be something much more global. How would this mentoring be? Is it going to be sort of like an online? Is it going to be in person? How often is it going to be just like a course that is uploaded within Research Alpha that people with specific skills can take, or is it given within a specific period of time? Just curious about how the mentoring would be.
So there's 3 layers of it. The first is we'll put up lots of resources on the pages once it's all set up, so you can definitely learn yourself. It's not difficult. So we'll have sort of research for business learning center, where you can learn how to do a proper SER framework, for instance, for storytelling for impact, where you can learn how translation works between research and business environments, where you can learn how to position yourself and things like that. So there'll be a lot of resources once we're up and running that people can just tap into directly. The second is teams. So for instance, if we have got a request for research from a company that's looking at, I don't know, biotechnology or agricultural new ammonia for fertilizers, green ammonia for fertilizers, and you're working on it, it's always easy to bring in somebody else, because it's not something that you would have a full breadth of expertise on. So that's the other element, looking at who's on the platform and says, oh, I've got expertise on this and that. I can work with you to build my profile on this particular forum, while at the same time helping you deliver this particular consultancy. And that will be embedded in the, as a, not a requirement, but as something we encourage all the researchers on the platform to do, bring in somebody else on the, it's the same thing we've done with our research, sort of research program in AFOX, if you're bringing in a fellow, you ask, who's your PhD student, who's your master's student, can you bring them on board? Can you help co-supervise with your Oxford collaborator and so forth? So that ethos remains and will flow into the work that we do at Research Alpha. And then the third element is a more directed one, right? So you can write to us directly. I'll put the email address on the website. on the chat, sorry, and you can write to us directly and say, I'm looking to partner with somebody who's doing ABC. And then we connect as we've done in multiple places. So where the genesis of this was that I do that work anyway. Now we just want to do it in a way that is more systematic, in a way that is more structured, and in a way that actually creates value for both the researcher who's doing this work, but also for the students who want to get mentored. But I think that's the three ways I can say we'll hope to embed it at full scale.
Thank you, Anne. And I think my last question is more of it's a round circle moment, because I remember that during my interview with AFOX, one of the main questions that you asked was, where do you see yourself in 5 years? So I think it's only fitting. So what is the vision? What is, when you think of Research Alpha in 5 years, what is the vision?
So that's really a good question, Mariam, and it's great that you're getting a time to turn the tables on me. For me, I don't think about 5 years. I think overall, in the end, what I would want to create is a distributed R&D network for businesses and investors in Africa. That's it. Because at the moment, the way we work, if you look at an ecosystem like Oxford, if somebody wants to find out about, a new battery technology, they'll call up someone, they'll go to the website, they'll find somebody. But then the university creates a funnel, right? It says, you can only talk to this person in this regard, and this is what we get out of it, and it makes it very difficult for you to actually do that. In the context of the continent, there are some universities that have got access to this and you can just call up somebody, but it's not always straightforward. It's not always easy to know who do I call to find out more information about this thing that I want to implement in my business, in my investment and so forth. So I hope that in the end we create a distributed platform, a distributed network of ready to access knowledge about the continent. And what's the motivation behind this? There was a recent work that was done looking at perceptions of risk in the continent versus real risks. So we lose about 4.2 billion annually because of media perceptions of risk of Africa, in terms of higher interest payments on debt, in terms of, cost of capital and so forth. And that is unnecessary. That funding could have gone to so many other things. So the role of this distributed R&D facility is to make sure we can separate out the real risks of operating in the continent versus the perceived risks. And so we can invest actually in ameliorating or addressing the real risks of working in the continent rather than the things we assume. And I think research unlocks that and clears out the, forgive my French, the BS from the reality. and that's, I think, is a big goal. That's a big vision.
So I'm going to open the floor for questions. Thank you so much, Anne. So Perseli, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, wants to know how easy was it to penetrate the market with Research Alpha? And what advice do you have for beginner entrepreneurs in the research space? How to go about finding partners, advertising, etc.?
To be fair, we are only beginning. So ask me that question in 4 years, I will tell you something tangible. But I think for me, it was, I'm not building for some outward market out there. I'm building for my peers. I'm building for people whose struggle I have seen. I'm not looking for a market out there. I'm very focused on the struggles that I have seen with my current work, with my current peers, with the incredible researchers that we've worked with in AFOX for the last 10 years. Right. So for me, because I wasn't going out there saying, hey, you random people, here is something that might work for you. I think it was a little bit easier because we're talking to people who get it, So I think I used the three-point thinking about this. Am I talking to people who get it? Am I talking to people who want it? Am I talking to people who can do it? And once we've got that structure together, then the rest of it, I think, it's been a bit more straightforward. We're still very young. I mean, we haven't gotten even off the ground yet. So this is my first actual conversation outside of a very small group of friends. So I'll tell you how it goes.
Thank you, Anne. I have a question from Matthew, and I think a lot of people might actually echo this sentiment in that Matthew has a master's degree in biotechnology and wants to know how he can get involved. And I think this also speaks to a bigger question of people who have master's degree and might have experience within the field.
Yeah, so I would encourage you to sign up, first of all. I mean, the reason why we put it at that level is because it's easier for us to convince people that this is someone who's legit, right? That's usually a pathway to make it easier for people. But there's nothing wrong. There's nothing, because on the sign up, you get to give a bit more information about what you have done yourself. And if you've got experience, sometimes even more than a freshly minted PhD student, you should put that in. And we encourage people who've got a LinkedIn profile, if that gives a bit more flavor of what you do, please just put it there. And then if we cannot give you a direct contact with an investor for a project, we'll put you in touch with the postdoc or the PhD who's running it, and you can be there. You can work with them as a research associate, and then the sort of income is split in equal measure. Depending on the workload that people have done. So I wouldn't discount you from signing up. Do fill it in. The form is pretty straightforward. Those who have looked it up, you can put in what you're currently doing and so forth, and then it's a lot more straightforward from there. So I don't think anybody should limit themselves just because you don't have this and that and that. I think you put yourself out there, and then we start the process. And there's multiple ways of getting engaged, including working within Research Alpha itself, because this is work that we're going to make available to all researchers, but there will be work that we will be doing as a core team of Research Alpha, right? As people, when people don't want like a one-off, conversation or two-point conversation, and they want like a longer-term engagement, we'll be doing that work in-house. So there's opportunity for master students and others as well to get involved.
Sorry, I was muted. Clement has a question. Clement, you can unmute and speak if you're comfortable with that.
Hello. I'm very sorry for dragging us back. For some strange reason, I lost internet access, and so I missed a couple of things. But I will just ask some specific questions. Maybe it has already been covered. So I'm quite happy with the idea about Research Alpha so far, based on what I've learned so far in the course of the session, and personally, it's something that I wanted to create even one myself, but I saw that as something I could also tap into, especially with the consultation aspect. So I wanted to know, so in this case, does it appear that the Research Alpha team gets the companies or businesses? I'm just trying to look at how the matching and the pairing will be done, and then is it something that everyone, so for instance, it could be that there's a particular consultation, then everyone has to apply for it, and then the best candidate being selected. I don't know how the matching and the pairing and those things will work in reality. Yeah, so I think that's what I wanted to be like, a bit more pragmatic, like how would the system work in operation?
Yeah. Thank you so much for that, Remand. We hadn't covered that, so it's a good question, very good question indeed. So at the first instance, we'll be doing the manual matching. So because the quality of the interaction is so important, and we want to make sure that the people that we put in touch with the investors are the right people for the right question, so the right person for the right seat. So we'll be doing that manually in the first instance. We'll look at through the database of the people that we've got and send like 3 profiles to the investor and say, these are the 3 profiles we think would fit very well for the work that you're doing. After some time, once we've got it in full throttle, that's the phase 1, so the MVP. After phase 1, I think the next level is we're developing an AI research mate for businesses and investors. So in that case, you'll put your profile up, you will make your profile as lucrative as you want. We'll provide all the support. And then they will just be going into the profiles and saying, oh, I'm looking for researcher in nanotechnology in Nigeria. And then they'll look it up, they'll see who's there, and then they can pick out from the list of the people that have come up who they want to work with. But that's the second layer of the work. In the first instance, we'll be doing that manually. And then after that, we'll be able to do it using our AI matching platform that's currently under development.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you, Clement, for the question. Mariam?
Yes,
go ahead.
Thanks, Anne. Thanks, Mariam.
I mean, it's a beautiful vision, innovative, and thanks for the presentation. So in one of the slides, you talk about logistics. I just wanted to understand what exactly goes into that part. What does it entail? Yeah.
So as a private consultant, as an independent consultant, when you're trying to get business, you have to set up a business first of all. You've got to get your taxes and everything in order. Set up, if you're based in the UK or based in whatever country, you've got to set up your own profile, right, as a company. And then you've got to set up your payment structures, right? How are you going to actually receive money? You don't usually, some companies don't want you to just give them an invoice, or they don't want you to give them a PO, or there's a whole process, or you give them a PayPal, and our company doesn't allow that for various reasons. So we streamline that process completely. So you don't have to set up your own business. You don't have to set up your own payment structure, your own scheduling processes. All that will be streamlined within the platform. And that's usually what puts off a lot of researchers from getting involved in independent consulting, because it's just a lot of time. The admin work itself takes more time than the actual research consultation, because that's stuff that you already know. So if somebody called you and asked you about the area of your research expertise, you could do it without batting an eyelid. But if you think about the work that goes into both the pre-consultation and the post, follow-up, what did you find interesting? What more do you need from me, etc. All that work is the work that we want to take away from the process and make it a bit easier for researchers to get involved, because we have very limited time, and the time that is spent on the logistics takes away from both the joy and the time that you spend on the actual engagement piece. Does that make sense?
Yeah, cool. Thank you.
Okay, another question from Clement.
Yeah, there's just a follow-up. So a quick one is, so at the moment it appears that you don't have like specific criteria apart from anyone being a researcher. So in case of competition, or let's say in the case where it becomes a bit competitive for decision making to be made in the pairing and matching, and so what are some of the ways you are going to handle that, especially when they demand, because it looks like it's quite an interesting idea, and I'm sure the more people get to know it, the more people will be interested in it. So how are you going to manage that, the demand, especially when your database is enormous, and then but the companies are just a few? So like, how are you going to go about that?
So I think that's a really good question, Clement. I mean, we're very fortunate that we're not in fact, why we started this is because the demand was far outweighing what we could supply. So we were a group of like 5 researchers that started, and we were getting asked all sorts of things, and we just didn't have the bandwidth to do all of that, plus our own work, right? So the demand far outstripped the supply, and that's why we're sort of setting it up. So, but that's a really good question. The idea for us is to keep matching the two. So if you think about Uber, if you have too many drivers and not enough people asking for rides, then drivers are like, well, what's the point of this platform? But also if you have too many on the supply side and not enough drivers, they're like, I'm waiting 3 hours. I don't need this. So we are matching that very carefully. And to be precise, we've started with very narrow specifications. If you go to the form, you will see we've got 4 focus areas in the first instance where we already have a high demand, right? So we've got AI and data science, which is basically a space that I've been involved in for a few years now, and there's clearly a much more needed nuanced understanding of the space from the African context and from emerging markets more broadly. And the second is around biotech, so life sciences and biotech. So that's a really core area, simply because of the risks there of doing the wrong thing. There's such high capital risk, so people are very keen to do the right thing. Otherwise, you get wasted. You waste a lot of resources. We've got a focus as well on climate tech. So that's simply because there's such a high demand, there's such influx of interest in this space that we need to have a lot more depth in understanding what interventions work, which ones don't, and why. And because we have specified sort of focus areas, these are areas we've already researched and we've already been involved in for many years, and that's what's driving it. As the platform grows, of course, we will add on more elements based on actual demand, to make sure that people who are on the platform are actually spending their time doing the things that we hope they are. So I hope that answers the question. Again, it's very early stages. A lot of our initial interactions are very much driven by the demand we currently have.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So recently, I think you sent out some link for those interested to complete. I just want to be sure, is that the database you're referring to?
That's only part of it. So
Okay.
those who are registering up, those who are new entrants, I've put a link again on the chat.
Okay.
Those are the new entrants, but in addition to those, we've got a range that we've been working with for many years in the past. So we've decided to expand it and open it up because, again, as I said, the demand was really outstripping what we could manage to do. And so we're encouraging more people to sign up, so we're able to provide the services to more investors, more businesses. And then there's also the question of expertise. As we grow, we will find out more where the actual need is, and then we'll maybe send out a call for very specific expertise. There's always some niche questions that come up, and you're like, okay, let's find out who's the exact person you need to talk to. So in addition to registering that, you make yourself available, as it were, to be contacted when something comes up that is related to your area of expertise.
All right. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Thank you so much. And we have a question from Yesua.
Yes, so thank you for everything you have shared. Yeah, thank you for everything you have shared. I was curious to know if it's possible you can, maybe there are other people like me, we really don't, maybe we can't be part of the larger team that you are creating, but we are interested to get the information, like, okay, like some documents, some articles from the work we have previously done or the work you are doing. We'd like to at least get what you really have done, what you are doing. So like articles, PDFs, yeah, something to read maybe. So at least we can broaden our knowledge, even without being part of your work. Is that kind of thing possible?
Yeah, absolutely. I just mentioned to Mariam earlier that as we grow, we'll be putting out a lot of information for people who want to be involved in this kind of work. So do take a look at the website in due course. It's not available now because we are in the process of building up both our database, but also our knowledge base. And as we grow, we'll be putting that out there. So at the end of the call, or maybe early next week, I'll send through Mariam to you all our social media pages as well, the LinkedIn and so forth, and you can be able to also follow there for information that we'll be putting out.